Berserk. The series is often hailed as one of the most masterfully crafted narratives in manga history. And no surprise here guys, it's my personal favorite manga. The world of Berserk is brutally immersive, the characters are devastatingly human, and I love the themes of fate, sacrifice, and the will to struggle onward. Kentaro Miura's storytelling is both emotionally complex and structurally meticulous, with so many different moving parts that connect seamlessly. But let's be honest guys, even in a work as airtight as Berserk, there are still moments that make me raise my eyebrow, just decisions made or not made that leave room for speculation. You could say, maybe, just maybe, that Berserk isn't perfect.
I have never heard anything so insulting in all of my life!
Alright guys, before you leave these scathing hate comments, let me at least acknowledge that these cracks in the story I don't really consider to be flaws. Some of these things could be windows into unexplained character psychology, hidden lore, plot holes, or events that the reader is just left to speculate on. And this of course brings us to today's video, where I'm going to be diving into one of the most interesting of these moments, a potential plot hole, or at least the way I see it, a glaring inconsistency in the Golden Age arc, specifically regarding the 100-Year War. The question being, why didn't the King of Midland send Wyald and the Black Dog Knights to capture the Fortress of Doldri? For those who don't remember, the Battle of Doldri was a turning point in the 100-Year War, and yet despite having an unstoppable force in Wyald and his men, the King of Midland chose not to deploy them. From what we're shown, Wyald and the Black Dog Knights were more than capable of taking the fortress. I don't even think he would have had to go into his full apostle form. The King of Midland even states that the Black Dog Knights were on equal footing with the Band of the Hawk in terms of valor. I don't care how strong General Boscan is, there's no way that he's beating Wyald, and the majority of you guys agree with me. Overall, I think the Black Dog Knight's savagery, brute strength, and unrelenting combat style would have easily overwhelmed the enemy. Even Guts is taken aback when fighting these guys, and remarks that regardless of how many he kills, they refuse to back down. So with all of this said, if the King of Midland knew of the Black Dog Knight's power, and there's every indication that he did know, then why were they held back during one of the most decisive battles in Midland's history? Why would the King of Midland prolong the 100-Year War, and by extension, the suffering of his people? Today, I'm going to dive into this question. Is this a true plot hole, or is there something deeper at play here? But before we dive into today's video, if you guys enjoy these deep dives into Berserk and just love discussing the complex world that Miura built, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out, motivates me to keep uploading, and of course, it lets me know that you guys are enjoying the content. But with all of this said, I thank you for watching regardless, and now, let's get into today's video. Why didn't the King of Midland use Wyald? Tracing our steps back into the 100-Year War, the Fortress of Doldri was considered to be impregnable. This was a stronghold that had eluded Midland's grasp for over a century. The Fortress of Doldri was commanded by none other than General Boscan and the Purple Rhino Knights, which honestly sounds like a pretty badass band name. But that aside, Boscan wasn't simply a commander, dude was an actual walking tank, like a medieval bulldozer. Boscan is one of the main reasons why Midland's forces failed to capture this fortress time and time again. Of course until Griffith and the Band of the Hawk emerged. But Midland's victory over the Battle of Doldri signified one of the most important turning points in the 100-Year War. It was a victory so significant that it secured Griffith's status in the court and ultimately put him on the path to royalty. After a century of bloodshed, destruction, and hardship, all it took was one decisive battle, one shift in power, and suddenly the war was over. The 100-Year War, which had ravaged Midland for generations, taking countless lives and draining its economy, came to a close. Peace descended on the land like a fog rolling in after a storm. Families were reunited. Soldiers, for the first time in 100 years, laid down their arms. The kingdom could finally breathe, rebuild, and heal. And yet, you have to ask yourself, if Wyald and the Black Dog Knights were more than capable of crushing Doldri, and we know that they are, why didn't this happen years earlier? Why prolong this 100-Year War? Why allow your people to suffer when you're holding a wild card in your back pocket? Pun intended. Now, I hate to reiterate this point, it practically feels like I'm talking about the droid attack on the Wookiees and just nobody gives a shit. But listen guys, this matters, alright? Because the manga makes it painfully clear that the Fortress of Doldri isn't just some random stronghold. This fortress acts as the strategic linchpin in Shooter's invasion of Midland. Over and over again, the story emphasizes that Doldri has become the most critical base of operations for Tudor's military. It's the heart of their campaign and the center of all their momentum. And you know what's even more damning about the manga? Is that it shows us that Midland has tried everything up until this point. The White Tiger Knights, which is supposed to be one of the kingdom's premier military forces, couldn't do anything. I mean, the fact is, Midland failed to take Doldri again and again. The fortress stood impenetrable and unshakable under the command of General Boscan. We're told and shown that capturing Doldri is the final objective, not just a checkpoint, not a bonus win condition. No, this is the objective. Whoever controls Doldri controls the war. And in the chapter The Wind of Swords, we get a rare moment where we look at the King of Midland, and he actually displays just how desperate and cornered the Kingdom of Midland has become. The king cries out with desperation, stating, anyone will do. Is there no one in Midland who can stop these black devils of Tudor?
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Alright, so what the hell is wrong with the King of Midland? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, let me rephrase that. Is the King of Midland an idiot? The king says anyone. Let me emphasize, anyone means Wyald. But if he really meant that, if he truly needed anyone to help him win this war and save his kingdom, why didn't he use Wyald? What's worse of all is that during the war council, the king's generals are genuinely mystified as to how they're going to beat Boscan and conquer the Fortress of Doldri, stating, now that we've lost the White Tiger Knights, who? And besides, if Griffith can't do it, I doubt there's anyone in Midland who can take Doldry. All the while, the King of Midland is just casually sleeping on the actual demon of war that he has at his disposal, someone with inhuman power that could have torn Boscan apart. And as I stated before, the king himself internally compares the Black Dog Knights to the Band of the Hawk in terms of valor. And at this point in the story, we know that the king was already aware of Wyald's strength because he's seen it firsthand. 5 years ago, the king met Wyald when he was witnessing an exhibition match between prisoners, and Wyald casually slaughtered his opponent like he was a warm-up set. So the king knew damn well what Wyald was, and more than that, what he was capable of. And still, he only sends him to the outskirts of the battle. This is the equivalent of watching your kingdom drown, yet refusing to throw the lifeline because you're scared of what the rope might do. Now this isn't just a simple strategic misstep, it's a decision, one that prolonged the war, and in doing so, prolonged the suffering of Midland's people. The bloodshed, the famine, the fear, the generations lost. So again I ask, why not Wyald? So, why not Wyald? Well guys, it's all in the name. It's because he is wild, and uncontrollable. Kentaro Miura gives us a critical piece of information when he shows that the King of Midland feared Wyald. Wyald wasn't just dangerous, the guy was hedonism personified, a violent, sadistic apostle with zero regard for rules, loyalty, decorum, or morality. And despite being called the Black Dog Knights, Wyald's men were not knights in the traditional sense. They were just a band of criminals, sex perverts, and killers. Judo even makes a comment about the depravity of these men, calling them the most roughshod company in all of Midland. The Black Dog Knights, from a political perspective, is a PR nightmare. And here's the thing guys, people in power, especially in politics, really care about their appearances. You definitely see this in today's current events, and this is especially true regarding the King of Midland. Public figures, especially political leaders, love to uphold spotless images and carefully distance themselves away from anybody who could tarnish their reputation. And well, Wyald's, let's just say this guy isn't exactly family friendly. The King of Midland remarks that he wanted to keep Wyald away from the center of his army, but more importantly, away from his presence. Now this raises an interesting question. Was the King of Midland truly trying to protect his kingdom, or was he really just protecting the crown and his own ego? Because let's be honest guys, the evidence heavily leans towards the latter. The king never hesitated to use the Band of the Hawk, even though many of the royals in the higher court dismissed them as nothing more than a glorified band of thieves. The King of Midland had no problem leveraging the Band of the Hawk when it benefited him, so then why is Wyald off limits? And here's where things get even more insane. We already know that the vast majority of the royals in Midland's higher court were already skeptical of the king's decision-making. We even have a manga panel where one of the high-ranking generals outright says that his majesty has gone senile. That's how much confidence they have in his leadership, literally fucking zero. So here's the irony and the crux of what I'm saying. If the King of Midland is already losing face by relying on a mercenary group like the Band of the Hawk to do what the noble armies couldn't, why not go all in? Why not unleash Wyald and the Black Dog Knights to capture the Fortress of Doldri and finally bring the 100-year war to an end? Midland could have ended the war years earlier, sparing an untold amount of lives. Oh, but wait guys, there's even more hypocrisy here. Try to strap in for this one. The king was perfectly willing to deploy Wyald when it came to settling a personal grudge that he held against Griffith. Oh, so suddenly Wyald isn't too dangerous or uncontrollable anymore. Suddenly, morality doesn't seem to matter too much. Now look guys, I'm not the Wyald advocate here, okay? I'm not Wyald's spokesperson. I'm not saying that sending Wyald and the Black Dog Knights to Doldri would have been the best option. Far from it, we all know what Wyald was. And if the king had unleashed him, I'm sure that Wyald would have pillaged, massacred, and assaulted God knows how many people in the surrounding regions. So for all the chuckle fucks in my comment section that say, oh Shane, you can't advocate for the King of Midland using Wyald to conquer the Battle of Doldri, I'm gonna ask you, why not? The King of Midland already knew exactly what type of man Wyald was, he knew that he was a monster, and yet the king still used him in the war by sending him to remote battlefields. So the king is essentially sending this guy to meaningless skirmishes on the outside of the battlefield, instead of deploying him where he could actually make a difference like at Doldri and end the 100-year war. The king has already compromised his morality by using Wyald, this absolute monster, so why draw the line at using him effectively? And it's not like Wyald would turn this down. I mean, the king has already been shown to offer Wyald any position or reward that he wants. The only real in-universe explanation that I can come up with for why the King of Midland would deploy Wyald in the war but refuse to use him effectively would probably be tied back to the king trying to preserve his own image. But again, there is a flaw with this explanation as well, because the king was already losing face by using the Band of the Hawk. But again, just imagine trying to parade Wyald around through the streets of Midland as the savior of the kingdom for, effectively just violating the Geneva Conventions. I mean, that shit's not gonna go well. So here's the moral quandary of the day. The King of Midland was already morally bankrupt, let's not pretend otherwise. He was already using Wyald and the Black Dog Knights in the war, already unleashing the monster, just ineffectively. He had no issue sending Wyald to pillage lawless regions, terrorize civilians, and wreak havoc wherever the crown didn't have to see it. But let's say he had sent Wyald to Doldry. We all know what would have happened. Wyald would have pillaged, slaughtered, and assaulted almost everyone there. It would have been an atrocity, plain and simple. And yet, by not doing so, by refusing to use Wyald where he actually mattered, the king prolonged the 100-Year War by possibly years. That's tens of thousands of Midland's own corpses piling up, both soldiers and civilians alike. And remember that this is a war. Midland had harbored ill will towards Tudor for over a century. This is their enemy. And the Fortress of Doldri was the linchpin of the entire war. And the king has his hands on a weapon that could have shattered that fortress and crushed their strongest adversaries with ease. So what's worse, unleashing a monster on an innumerable amount of lives, which the King of Midland was already doing, or letting tens of thousands of your own people die in order to keep your monarchy's reputation intact? So again, I ask you, why not Wyald? What's going on, guys? Outro Shane here. Just wanted to say my take on this. I wouldn't say that this is a full-blown plot hole. I really think that this is just more of a little bit of a narrative contradiction. This is more of an inconsistency for me that definitely raises some, interesting questions, specifically about, just the King of Midland, power, politics, human priorities, and so on. I really do wonder if the king honestly was obsessed with his legacy and just, didn't want to just end the 100-Year War, or if he really wanted to be remembered for how he ended the 100-Year War, and if you can end something in the right way, if that makes any sense. And again, Wyald is dark, chaotic, obviously. I mean, so it's, Miura does a lot of this stuff intentionally, and the fact that we can even talk about this and debate on this so many years later, I think it's just another reason why I love Berserk so much. But guys, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel out. And of course, never stop questioning the world of Berserk. Until next time, everybody take care, and I'll see you with a new Berserk video soon.